Hello and welcome to the premiere episode of Talkin' Games with Kelly and Andrew. I'm Andrew.
I'm Kelly.
So this is our first episode, Kelly. Are you excited?
I'm very excited. It's been a
For
long
those,
time coming.
yeah, we are reuniting. We used to do a radio show back in the day when we were in college, and now this is coming back together to talk about video games.
Yes.
So why don't you get us started, Kelly? What's new this week? What's in the video game news?
Well, we have quite a bit to get into. The first thing is something that I can speak on. So Mass Effect Legendary Edition, it came out about a week ago, May 14th. Um, and the original Mass Effect 3, I remember because I was there for launch. I was on the BioWare forums in 2011 talking about Mass Effect 3. um, trying to get hype for the release. So something big in Mass Effect 3 is there's a romanceable character who covers her face, and you never see it. And in the third game, if you romance her, you get to see what her face looks like in a small way. It's not really a big part of the game. It's not story changing. It's not life changing. But there were a lot of complaints because the original photo was just like a stock image photoshopped with like glowing eyes. And people were like, what the heck? Honestly, I've been playing through it and there haven't really been that many story changes.
hmm
I know we kind of talked a little bit about one last week in the first game, but that has been really the only one I've noticed so far. So it's interesting to me that they changed that amongst other things that they did not change, which probably would have won them some brownie points for changing. But not really the biggest controversy. There are other little small things here and there. They changed some angles to be some camera angles, I should say, to be a little less creepy. Um, but like I
That's
said, kind of
that's
a
a nice way of
small,
putting it.
right. It's still like impossible to avoid in some instances, just based on character design and stuff like that. But
hmm
um, like I said, it was kind of a weird and small change. But I'm glad that they did it because it was really lame in the original trilogy. I never romanced her, so I only saw it in like YouTube videos and stuff, but it was really lame. So I'm glad they changed that.
Well, yeah, because I can see you like get attached to this character and you're excited to see what they look like, and then it's just like very clearly a stock image of a human being, and it's not made in engine, and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
that's not what I was expecting or hoping for.
exactly.
Well, good on them. I mean, if you have to make small change or if you have to make changes, I'm assuming that those little ones are the easiest, and like that's something that they could have knocked out very quickly, but also that made a lot of people happy, I'm sure, especially fans of that character.
Hmm. And she's very popular romance option. Probably the most popular. Well, I don't know the exact statistics, but she is very, very popular. So it doesn't surprise me that that was changed.
Right. So, popping over the pond to the east, we got some news from Pokemon and Nintendo. Supposedly, according to some rumors, there is going to be a Pokemon Presents conference in June, presumably to talk about some of the upcoming releases. So they right now they have the remake of Diamond and Pearl, which I'm not a fan of, and then Pokemon Unite, which is a mobile Switch game, um, and then potentially some more on Pokemon Legends, the new game coming out early next year. I think it's interesting. It considering E3 is back this year, it really shows that Pokemon wants to be separate from Nintendo in a lot of ways. That they're willing to have their own presentation, to keep because they could use the eyes on the Nintendo conference to get more eyes on their games, but I guess with how big Pokemon is now, they don't even feel the need for that.
Yeah, I also think that's interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about a later story with another thing leading into E3. But I always think that it's interesting that they don't build on the hype of E3. I mean, I guess they are because it's happening before, but it just surprises me that it feels like there's so many eyes on E3 at any of the conferences, really. So it's kind of surprising, but um, I look forward to watching. just because I am very interested in the Diamond and Pearl remakes. I know you said that you don't like them, um, but those are my favorite Pokemon games, so I'm excited to see more of it and to understand more of why certain choices were made.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like I want to be interested because for me that's my favorite generation as well. Um, I'm not a fan of the art style, and it's a little sad putting because it looks very similar to the Link's Awakening remake from 2019, but a less charming version, if you will. Like when you put them side by side, there's clearly like a lot more details in like the character models and the lighting in Link's Awakening, even though it is very chibi. And I think I would enjoy it, but it's just the level of details is so low in a lot of things.
Hmm.
And I'm probably being like a little overly critical, but like knowing just how many billions of dollars Pokemon rakes in every year, and they can definitely afford to make it look however they want. It just disappoints me that they don't shoot a little higher, you know.
Yeah,
But the originals will always be there, and those kind of games they're like actually timeless, and it's not like difficult to go back like with some other earlier games.
right. Would agree with that. So, also going with Nintendo, they announced a new amiibo, a Zelda and Loftwing amiibo, in preparation for the Skyward Sword remaster. Um, if you don't know, if you've never played Skyward Sword, there's these things, they're called Loftwings. They're like big dodo birds, kind of pelican-esque creatures, and they're sort of like companions to, like, Link has one, Zelda has one. They're like just companion. They're almost like chocobos,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a
Big,
very good compare. Well, they can
like,
fly and Chocobos
yeah,
can't, but like
but
design and the way they are towards the characters, yeah, for sure.
right, just big birds you can ride. Um, and so they're releasing an amiibo with Zelda and her Loftwing. It's very cute. I'm not really a big amiibo collector. I actually have zero. But, you know, uh, Andrew, I know that you're a big amiibo collector, so
Yes, I have a little more than zero. I have 60. Um,
it's
I
definitely
have
more than zero.
I have this one pre-ordered, so soon 61. Um, I think it's a gorgeous amiibo. I think it's a little more expensive because the average amiibo cost is now 16. That's how much they charge, and this one's 25. But considering it's like two characters on one stand, that makes sense to me.
Hmm.
Um, I think I'm excited to own it because it's beautiful. Out of principle, I think it's awful that um, the functionality of it. Because for those who don't know, amiibos are not just cute little figures; they also have a little NFC chip in them, and you can scan them onto your console, and they can do something in different games. Um, in this game, if you scan your Zelda and Loftwing amiibo, no matter where you are in the world, you get the access to fast travel, which um, when it comes to HD remasters, one of the biggest things is like little quality of life improvements, and a lot of people have a lot of negative thoughts on Skyward Sword, which like we'll talk about in a second. But the fact that they're locking like a very helpful quality of life feature behind a very difficult to obtain $25 figure, I cannot agree with that practice. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I feel like this whole remaster with Skyward Sword has just been really, I don't want to say disappointing, but it's just been really like gross to me. Like they're charging the full 60, right? For
Yeah, which
Skyward
is
Sword.
more than it cost. It was 50 when it came out on the
Right.
Wii.
Right. And now they're saying on top of this, to unlock this key feature in the game, you need to have an extra $25 or more, depending on, where you are in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. It feels kind of like predatory and a little bit creepy and a little bit weird. And I feel like I don't understand. I mean, I do understand it's about money, but it's just like disappointing to see. I guess disappointing is the word I wanted to use.
Well, it's just when you look at the contrast between this and like Breath of the Wild, say, which had amiibo functionality, in that game you would scan things and usually it would give you like a chest with some bonus things in it. And then if you scanned the Wolf Link amiibo, which came out for Twilight Princess, it would give you a little Wolf Link. It would walk along with you for a little while. which was nice, but it was not game changing. It was not essential to your progress or to your enjoyment of the game. So it was kind of just like a little bonus. Whereas this feels like an essential feature to making the game more enjoyable and more playable, locked behind a, again, very difficult to find and pretty expensive figure.
Yeah. And I feel like it's disappointing too, in a sense that I this remaster really could have endeared Skyward Sword a little bit more in people's eyes because, like you said earlier, it's not everybody's favorite Zelda game. And I feel like this remaster really had the opportunity to like endear it to people, like, just do away with those awful motion controls. And because I think there were a lot of redeeming parts of Skyward Sword, I liked the art style a lot. The
Hmm.
characters were fun. Um, there's just some aspects to it, like it was really locked in with that motion control, and it just made it really not fun to play. Um, and I don't know, I just feel like it lost the opportunity to, first of all, charge less than $60 for a remaster
Yeah, with
of
no
one
major
game
improvements.
with no major improvements. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm disappointed and sad because I feel like Skyward Sword HD had the potential to be like a real, oh, you know what? Skyward Sword wasn't that bad. It's actually pretty fun, especially when you play, the remaster. But unfortunately, it's got a lot of like high gates to get over.
Yeah, this could have been a redemption story, and instead it's just reiterating Skyward Sword's position in the Zelda franchise and in Nintendo's history. So
Yep.
it's kind of a disappointment.
Yep.
So Nintendo adjacent is Sega. Funny to say that after their long history with each other, but their 2021 fiscal year sales are now public, and color me surprised, their best-selling franchise is still Sonic the Hedgehog. Uh, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the blue blur. Can't even say his name right. I love the blue blur, but not because he has good games. Uh,
Yeah.
and in 2021, hearing that his series, which includes this year's Sonic and Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, Team Sonic Racing, Sonic Mania, and Sonic Generations. So yes, that includes the 2011 game. uh, Sold 4.5 million units. And looking at Sega's other top games, it's Total War, which I have very little knowledge of, so it's surprising to see it second on this list. Uh, Third is Football Manager, you know, my favorite hardcore game. And then fourth is Persona, which makes me a little disappointed because I wish it was a little higher. It's just strange seeing Persona, the series that is revered and I love very much, fall so far behind Sonic.
Right.
I
I, this has nothing to do with the movie, right? I mean, it's not
No, no,
like
no, no, no.
people being like, "Oh, Sonic, we loved the Sonic movie, so maybe Sonic games aren't actually that bad." Like, do you think maybe that had something to do with it?
It
I don't
might,
know.
well, the thing, Sonic Generations being on this list makes me think, yeah, maybe that, because that is a 10-year-old game now. And so it having sales, presumably on PC, because you can't even purchase it on modern consoles. Uh, Probably there was like a decent number of like an older generation of people who liked Sonic back in the day, and then maybe took their kids to this movie, and then were like, wow, let's play the games too.
Hmm.
Because like, and I guess Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games is like always a surprisingly decent hit every time it comes out. And, maybe because there was no Olympics, this was the Olympics this year. Mario and Sonic were the Olympics of 2020.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know if they're going to have to put a patch out to correct that, but I mean, good on Sega. Sega has a lot of great franchises, and they own a lot of IPs that I love. So I want to see them succeed. It's just I'm continually surprised that Sonic, who has floundered many times through the decades, continues to be as big as he is and a cultural icon.
Yeah, he just has the staying power. He's a good mascot.
Yeah. I mean, that movie probably helped. I loved the movie. I acknowledge that it was a little dumb, but it was cute, and Sonic was cute, and I thought Ben Schwartz did a good Sonic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I look forward to the next movie with Knuckles and Tails and hopefully some other characters that we don't yet know about.
Yes. Big the cat. Here's hoping.
I would love to see Jim Carrey talking to a live action Big the Cat.
Oh, Froggy.
This show's canceled.
So moving on from Sega and Sonic and all of his companions in Collie. The Xbox Game Pass May releases are including Red Dead Online, Psychonauts, Final Fantasy X Remake, Outlast 2, FIFA 2020 or FIFA 21, not 2021. I'm sorry, I'm reading these off a list, so I'm like, but I will say the thing that I'm most excited about in Game Pass May is nothing other than Peggle 2. Finally.
Audience, I wish you could see the look in Callie's eyes. Just so much, they're just shining right now with excitement.
Finally, us Peggle users, us loyal Pegglers, finally can play our favorite game for free. Well,
for a monthly cost.
Terms and conditions apply. But yeah, I feel like that's a pretty solid list. Red Dead Online I played for like a week. It was really fun.
I'm continually surprised every month because I purchased an Xbox last calendar year for Game Pass specifically. I got a used one because every time I look at what they're adding, it's just and very rarely removing stuff. It's just a list of quality titles, and the fact that every major Xbox release comes to Game Pass day one, like I would kill for something like that on PlayStation.
Ugh, I know.
So I mean,
us Sony heads, we really don't get our just desserts, do we?
Yeah, no, we pay for everything. But I mean, I'm excited. For me personally, the game I will be playing is Psychonauts because I know that classic game is well revered by a lot of people. I've never played it, and from what I've seen of the footage, I'm very interested in Psychonauts 2. It looks very, very intriguing, and also it's just seeing like that redemption story of any game that kind of fizzled out and then is making a return in a sequel. I'm just excited by that possibility, so I will be playing that game sometime in the near future. So moving on into some more substantial to the greater world news. Warner Bros. Interactive future is currently uncertain because Discovery acquired Warner Media. There's a lot of implications beyond games that we won't go into because that's not what this podcast is about. But a lot of big changes could be happening from this. Warner owns HBO Max. Discovery obviously owns Discovery Plus. So I encourage you to find another podcast that talks about that because my knowledge is limited and also there's a lot to say on that. But Warner does not just own television and film companies, they also own a lot of video game companies. So they make the Batman games, they make Injustice fighting games, among many others. And during these acquisitions, a lot of people were asking what's going to happen with those companies. That happened early last week, but there were no answers until this week. We still do not have definitive answers, so expect us to return to this topic later. But essentially, it's sounding like they're going to be very selective, keep a couple studios, and then probably sell off the rest, which I think personally sounds kind of exciting because, Warner is not exactly the nicest video game publisher. They are very predatory with their microtransactions and stuff. Just look at Shadow of War from a couple years ago, full of microtransactions. So it could be very exciting to see those games and those capable developers in more generous hands, perhaps, than that of Warner Media.
Yeah, I always find it interesting when two like really big, like media conglomerates, like somebody gets acquired or there's an acquisition of some sort, because
Hmm.
it's very much like, okay, like what does this mean now? What is it going to mean in the future? So I mean, this is kind of how I felt when Microsoft purchased Bethesda, right? I mean, that was crazy. I guess time will tell what's going to happen, but I agree with you. I think it's never a bad thing to change management when the old management was obviously doing something unscrupulous
Yes,
in
and
some way.
I don't think if it weren't for this acquisition, I do not think there would be any major shakeups with Warner Brothers. So this might be what it took for there to be some actual positive change.
So moving on from that, I feel like I've used that transition like one too many times now.
Well,
Um,
just got to come up with a fresh new one.
I know I have to start brainstorming. So a photo from the Uncharted movie, period,
The
not plural. The Uncharted
Uncharted movies movie.
movie released, and it's, if you don't know who's in the movie, I will tell you right now. Tom Holland, Spider-Man, as we know him, is playing Nathan Drake, a young Nathan Drake. Like, okay, all right, I guess. And then Mark Wahlberg, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, is playing Sully. So I have a few thoughts, but the most important one being that in this photo, Sully has no mustache.
Yes.
And we see Sully in the games old and less old. Still,
Never
still
young.
never
Never
young,
young.
but he consistently has a mustache. Not a big
Yes.
deal, but you know what? It's breaking my
No,
heart.
no, 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 no. It's a big deal.
It's breaking my heart. I don't understand. I don't understand why this movie needs to be made. I like Tom Holland, okay? I have no problem with Tom Holland. I think he's a pretty good actor. I don't understand the casting direction of this movie. I don't understand the reason that this movie is going to exist. I don't understand anything. And I think what frustrates me is that people are like, well, it's like a young Nathan Drake. I'm like, guess what? We already got young Nathan Drake. I know it wasn't a whole game, but we got him twice. He was really little and then he was less little. And then he was an older man. So it's like I feel like we've really juiced this character for all that we can get. You know what I mean? We're having all of the lemongrass shots. He has been juiced. It's time to put a stop to this. Please. The games are already like movies. I don't understand. Okay,
That's the
sorry.
big thing for me. No, I'm with you on that because like with a lot of video games, I think adaptations are possible, and lately, there have been some video game adaptations that prove like there's hope for that medium, and we'll get into that a little more when I talk about Castlevania. But in this case, this Uncharted is basically sold as a cinematic franchise, like you're playing an Indiana Jones movie, and you said it. Nathan Drake's story has been told plenty and completely, and there's a reason that Naughty Dog used Uncharted 4 to bring his story to a close. And they
Mm-hmm.
even made another Uncharted game after that without him. So like they clearly do not think that there's anything left in his story. So it is weird that Hollywood's like, huh, bet.
Right. Ugh, it
It
fills
will.
me. It's kind of like I think things can work as miniseries. Like I kind of feel the same about The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't need to be a miniseries or a show. I love Pedro Pascal, but like we don't really need to see Joel and Ellie's story. It kind of is over.
Yes.
So I'm like, I just feel very like, you know, I feel a lot of trepidation with these video game miniseries and movies. I have not seen one that I've been like, oh my God, we can do it, you guys. You know what I mean? Except for, like you said, Castlevania. And I feel like Castlevania has such a, like, expansive lore as a
Yeah.
universe that it works a little bit better
It's also
in term.
very loosely based. It's like the same characters in general plot, but they basically wrote their own story.
Right. So it's kind of like, okay, like, I'm not sure that we need to be retelling these stories 1,000 times. Oh, Nick
No.
Drake's gonna be a rascal. Oh, we've never seen that before. Like that's the basis of his entire character. He's like a more approachable Indiana Jones type. So I don't know. He's kind of like Lara Croft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's very pleasant to look at. He's quippy.
Are we
He's
talking Tom
charming.
Holland or Nathan Drake now?
They both. I mean, that's Tom Holland is he's a good looking guy. Anyway,
Yeah, that
they
was a
both.
good
I mean,
six knows. I can tell you're very excited about that question.
I'm just saying. I don't know. I just feel a lot of trepidation. I don't know if they're gonna pull it off, and I really do not like Mark Wahlberg. I don't think he's a very good actor. And it takes a certain type of like old man charm to play Sully, and I really don't. I mean, I know he's not old in this movie; it's a prequel, as we've established, but um, he just is not charming to me in any way, shape, or form. So I
No,
think it
and he
would
has no
be
mustache.
he has no mustache, which is the most important thing, as we
I mean, like, is Tom Selleck busy right now?
know. Can we get him on the line?
Yeah, like, can we just
Tommy.
borrow his mustache at least?
Right, right. That's all I really need. I'll be satisfied.
Wow. All right, I'm gonna use that opportunity to move on to the next subject. I think once Tom Selleck's mustache has entered the picture, we may have gotten off track.
True.
So anyway, in relation to Tom Selleck's mustache, there has been a Final Fantasy spin-off, presumably announced. And by that I mean there have been lots of reports that a spin-off is in the works from Team Ninja. So Koei Tecmo, they have Team Ninja in-house. They made the Ninja Gaiden games, and more recently they made Neo 1 and Neo 2, Nioh Neo. Um, which are Souls-like games. So, according to this report, it will be a Souls-like game set adjacent or in the Final Fantasy I universe, which is a very underexplored world. Um, it is going to be called Final Fantasy Origin, if this report is correct, and it will be shown off extensively at E3 during the Square Enix conference, with a demo or open alpha coming shortly after in mid to late summer. I'm surprised by this. Final Fantasy is a long running franchise that I love very much. It has quite a few spin-offs. I would not have guessed a Souls-like to be the next one.
I agree. I would also not have expected that, but once I read the article that you sent, I was like, "Oh yeah, this makes sense."
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like they with Final Fantasy 14, they're like, "Oh, we can do this." So now they're kind of like, "We might be able to do this too," and then be like, "Oh, and we can do this." I feel like there's the thing about Final Fantasy is there's like so many different types of universes.
Yeah.
There's like cyber futuristic eco punk, and then there's like high fantasy, and then there's low fantasy, and then it's oh, we're using Coleman cooking and camping products on our road trip with the boys. It's like it's such a deep universe that I feel like it has a lot of untapped potential, especially Final Fantasy 1. I couldn't even tell you what it's about or what the
There's
universe is like.
crystals, um,
Crystals,
and a
okay,
fantasy.
and a fantasy,
I think
right?
it's the last one. I think
And
it's
there's
the last fantasy.
and there's probably some summons. I'm assuming some Shiva, some
Perhaps
some
maybe an Ifrit.
yeah, maybe an Ifrit, a what do they call it? Baphomet? That's the devil, isn't it? What is it? Like it
I
starts
know
with a
what it is.
B.
It's Bahamut.
Bahamut. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying this. I cannot verify. I've not played the original, so perhaps Bahamut is in that
Right.
one.
Right.
I think there's swords.
Oh, you know what? You're probably right.
There's probably swords.
There's definitely, well, I don't want to say for sure. Things happen in that game.
That's so controversial.
I know I shouldn't have said that.
But in all seriousness, this is a good joke, but it is true that that is a very underexplored, underknown universe in a very popular franchise. So it's a very good idea, I think, to uh, bring back something as unknown as the first Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is half as good as it sounds, because I'm not the hugest fan of Souls likes, but I also trust Team Ninja a lot, and I trust Final Fantasy's creative directors these days. I think that could be a really special game and a really interesting thing that we definitely have not seen before.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, Nintendo adds four games to their classic lineup, quote unquote. Some SNES games and an NES games. I don't know why people say SNES and then they say NES. They should say SNES and NES, but I guess there's some branding confusion with Earthbound. Anyway, so for the SNES, they've got Caveman Ninja, which I think is a regional title, because otherwise known as Joe and Mac.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know Joe and Mac. I did not know that it was also called Caveman Ninja.
yes, like I said, I'm thinking that may have been a regional thing. But another one, Magical Drop 2, which used to be only in Japan. And they're joined by Spanky's Quest,
Ah,
a Natsume
of
game, which is
course.
interesting because Natsume is kind of doesn't exist anymore in the way that it used to. And then Super Baseball Simulator
Uh-huh, of course.
1.000, maybe
Of course.
1000. It's a little unclear. And then the only NES game is Ninja Jajamaru-kun. I'm assuming there's a ninja in the game. Let me read the description. That's the one that
We have all these
that's
hot takes today.
I know, that's the one that really stuck out to me. Take on the role of a ninja and rescue the captured Princess Sakura in this action-packed game, originally released only in Japan. So quite a few of these games were Japan-only releases. Jajamaru must use his throwing stars, his never mind. Never mind. His throwing
Wait.
stars to defeat lurking monsters. I was gonna like try because I used to watch a lot of Naruto when I was younger, so I was gonna try and say throwing stars, but like in Japanese, but I'm not gonna do that. So keep an eye out for the ultimate power up, a ride on Gamappa-kun, the giant frog. Speaking of Naruto, giant frog.
I'm so happy that we're describing this game so vividly.
That's the only one I really cared about. Um, the other ones looked kind of. I mean, they're all the same. It's like let's go find the girl and we'll save her.
Yeah.
Except for Super Baseball Simulator, which there's no girl to save, as
No.
far as I know.
Just homes to run.
Just homes to run. And that's it. That's what they're releasing for their classics lineup. If you're into that kind of stuff, I'm not.
I'm gonna share my hot take on this.
Hmm.
It's a bad lineup.
It's it's not great. I mean, I feel like all of the classics that we know and love have already been out, though. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, we're missing like a few ones. Namely, Earthbound is just a
Ugh,
giant exclusion that like
don't even say it. I can't even talk about Earthbound.
it's just I there's definitely a lot of classic SNES games. I'm not as big on NES because those games feel much more dated. But like Nintendo's got bank. Pay some developers, pay Square, pay Konami or Capcom to get some classic games from them to put on this platform because like as it stands they're putting out like little games that either nobody's ever heard of or just nobody cares to play. Except of course Ninja Ja Maru,
Coon.
which Kun, sorry. Ninja Maru Kun.
Yes,
Correct? Okay, I
correct.
got it. I'm impressed with myself because I don't have the list in front of me right now. But it's just such a wasted platform and like it doesn't cost a lot. It is $20 a year if you're paying for a single plan and 35 for a family plan. So I am on a family plan. I pay $4 a year for this. I'm not upset that like I'm not getting a value. I just think it's a real waste of potential. And the fact that they haven't brought N64 to this in any capacity, it just has really fallen to the wayside, I think.
Yeah, I think you made a good point too. I mean, I know I said I couldn't talk about Earthbound, but I love Earthbound. Um, I cannot believe that that game has not been. It just doesn't make sense to me. Why have him as a Smash character? Why have Lucas as a Smash character when these games are clearly not getting anything? They're not
Yeah.
going to get anything from Nintendo.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand. Um, I don't know. It just blows my mind. You're right. It's kind of a. I don't want to say a scam, but it's kind of like, can you guys like do more, Nintendo? Poke, poke, poke. Do
Poke
something.
poke.
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe in June at E3 time they'll announce something exciting, but as it stands, I kind of have minimal hope for their classics line.
Yeah.
In other news that I personally do not find exciting, Devolver Digital is reportedly going to go public soon. So, for those who don't know, Devolver Digital is the biggest indie publisher on the scene. They publish countless games every year. Probably not countless, considering it's probably like 50, which most people can count to 50. But they're releasing several games basically every single month. They're enabling a lot of developers to show off their stuff. I think it's an excellent company. They have a great business model. Um, but they're an independent company. The whole thing is that they are an independent company and they are here to support independent companies, make their games, put them out there. And then if a game's made or released by Devolver, I feel like I'm much more likely to hear about it. Games I wouldn't have otherwise because the indie scene is so overly packed. So it allows a lot of people to shine. But the second that they go public, which reportedly they're going public for about $1 billion, which really proves that they are successful.
Yeah.
Um, I just don't like the idea that they have to start answering to shareholders, that they're no longer a true, like, they're no longer the indie powerhouse. They are now a public company that helps indie developers.
Yeah. This was quite shocking to me. I remember when Devolver Digital, because didn't they publish Hotline Miami?
Yeah.
That was like the thing, That's all I knew them for way back in the day. And I remember their like crazy E3 presentations where people would be like bleeding out of their brains and stuff. It was like, whoa, this company's crazy. And then I feel like with Fall Guys, it was just like, surprise. Oh, you thought we were an indie company? Psych, we're billionaires. We've made so much money, we don't even know what to do with it. So everybody can buy a little stock in us.
Yeah.
So I don't know, kind of disappointing, but not all that surprising when you actually think about it, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I mean, ultimately, people who run companies want to make money, so I guess it's not the most surprising. Just disappointing that the indie company is no longer, if this is true, which it is reported, but it could end up not being true. It's just a little disappointing that they're not going to be as indie anymore.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's change gears here.
Oh,
Let's
was
uh
that a pun?
that was a kind of a pun.
Was that a pun?
Let's use a wrench, a giant wrench, and have big ears. And I
Oh,
think I'm extending this a little
oh,
farther than it should have been
yeah,
to
yeah.
talk about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is coming out next month. It is one of the first truly big PS5 exclusives and sequel to the beloved Ratchet and Clank franchise. There's going to be a lot to say about that. Come June 11th, the episode that will come after that, uh, there will be lots to talk about.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll have
very,
an E3 Bonanza blowout.
oh my goodness. The thought of having an E3 conference blowout and a new Ratchet and Clank to talk about, boy oh boy, stay tuned in. Anyway, so Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, they announced a list of accessibility features. I am not going to go through this entire thing because it is literally 3 pages long, which is remarkable. It's great. Um, so, for those who don't know, modern game developers are really trying to integrate a lot of accessibility features. This is stuff like changing certain buttons to toggles so you don't have to mash buttons, um, reducing difficulty to a point where even if you have some kind of disability that prevents you from enjoying a game fully, it becomes way more manageable. There's a lot of like aim assist modes so that you don't have to worry about shooting or like locking onto enemies and such. And then there's a lot of things with color blindness or like epilepsy, just basically allowing anybody who wants to play, regardless of any disability or anything that's preventing you from doing so. Um, which I feel like this should all be a given, but it's not, so it's exciting to see it. Like, a lot of games don't even allow you to choose subtitle size, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then this game is coming in and bringing tons of things to allow people to like remap controllers, change every setting, make sure they can enjoy it as fully as they want to.
I I agree, and I thought it was really cool how if you read the list, it's like there's not really like a colorblind quote unquote setting, but it's like so customizable that for any type of color blindness that you might
Hmm.
experience, whether that be like red, green, or any other color blindness, you can kind of customize it to a point where you kind of make your own.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. Um, I know that The Last of Us Part 2 was really big on the accessibility front.
Yeah. Very
Um,
extensive.
so it's always a good thing when this type of stuff becomes more popularized. And I know that there's like an award for it now at the Game Awards, which is kind of cool. And I hope that that is something that developers take more seriously, because it's like it's not right that in 2021 people can't enjoy the games that they want to play just because of something as silly as like the developers didn't add a subtitle size option, like you said. So,
Yeah.
not that it's silly, but you know what I mean. Like, it's silly that the developers wouldn't add that. Yeah,
It's low effort. It's not like some giant investment that they can't afford to make. You can
exactly.
afford to add a slider to make your text bigger
Right,
at the very least.
right. So, I don't have a good transition. I was like trying to something, and then I was like, no, it's gonna sound stupid. Anyway, so the PlayStation 5 is estimated to have sold twice as much as the Series X in 2021 so far, which is really wild to me because last week we just had that conversation about the PS5 shortage going on right
Hmm.
now because of the like the what are they called, the supercomputer parts.
Yeah.
But apparently that has not stopped the train, and the train keeps chugging, and it arcs towards Sony.
So you
I'm
can't
done
come
with
up
the
with a tradition, but I really
uh,
like all of the train stuff.
thank you. I know I was struck with inspiration. Like might much like someone may be struck by a train.
I was going to say we could use that as a transition into the next thing, but we're also not done talking about this, so it'd be kind of preemptive, I would say.
Right, right. But I think in the article it was saying that Switches still have sold the most out of all.
That makes sense because they're not having as much difficulty keeping up with, actually putting them on the shelves. So,
Yeah, I do remember there was a Switch shortage like last year around the beginning of the pandemic, but that was like what's the word I'm looking for?
extenuating circumstance.
Right. Everyone was buying it all at the same time. So,
Yeah, and there was no way they could have seen that coming. So,
right.
um, I mean, it's not super surprising. PlayStation always has better starts than Xbox, except for the 360 era. Um, both of them have legs. Both of them will keep selling, and they're not really competitors anymore.
Yeah.
But twice as many is what's really surprising me. Like that's a not insubstantial number.
Yeah.
So shall we use this transition into the next subject?
Yes, let's.
See, I brought it back. All right, so now we're moving on to E3 time. It has been announced that Summer Games Fest will be returning this year. So for those who don't know, Summer Games Fest was a essentially E3 replacement last year. It was a one-day big show and then a bunch of other smaller like developer showcases after that to talk about the games that were revealed. It was bad. There was there was very little
Sorry.
shown off. It felt quite tossed together. It's a Jeff Keighley production, who is the host of Game Awards.
A Jeff Keighley original with his athletic shoes and his blazers and his jeans.
Goodness, what a man. Let's get him on. Let's call him up and get him as a guest.
Mr. Keighley, please, we're begging you.
Well, I'm not quite begging. I'm not.
Oh, yeah, me neither. Yeah. I wasn't either. Just doing it for the jokes, folks.
Anyway, so Jeff Keighley said that we will be returning this year with more than a dozen reveals, which, if you say that with a good spin, it's like, wow, a dozen? But then, like, you look at every E3 time, and it's like, wait, aren't there like 100 game reveals? Is a
Yeah,
dozen like more than 12? It's like, oh, okay. Um,
right.
but we have a lot of big names that are going to be there. 2K, EA, Epic Games, PlayStation, Sega, Square Enix. The thing is a lot of these developers could just be showing one commercial for a game that might not even be like news. It might be an old commercial, and then they are included on this list of partners who will be there. So I'm always weary when I see like PlayStation on this or like Square Enix. I'm like, okay, but like, are they actually going to show anything?
Yeah, I kind of have a feeling it's going to be kind of what you're saying. It's just a lot of commercials, maybe stuff we've already seen.
Yeah,
Nothing as extensive as what we would see at like an E3 conference. I can barely remember last year's. I I think there was everything I do is like frame of reference from Dragon Age. So I think there was like like a developer diary for Dragon Age 4, and I just remember that being the most exciting thing.
yeah,
Maybe that's my own personal preference, but it's a lot of like little like cheeky stuff like that.
yeah. It's not something you don't tune in for like wild reveals, but
Yeah.
what really surprises me about it is that it's taking place on Thursday, June 10th, um, which really feels like Jeff Keighley's taking a very direct shot at E3, which starts on Saturday, June 12th, 2 days later.
Yeah.
I, I understand Jeff Keighley's desire to overthrow E3, but the name recognition behind E3 will just, it's just insurmountable. I don't think he can do it, but at the same time, I like video game reveals, so if we get good reveals from this and E3, oh well, both can exist.
Yeah. I'm down for both.
So we'll know in a couple weeks. 3 weeks, correct? That's
Uh
insane.
yeah, 3 weeks.
3 weeks we will know what they have in store, both E3 and Mr. Keighley.
Mr. Keeley.
Can we just call it the Keighley Show? Can we just call Summer Games Fest the Keighley Hour?
Yeah. The Keeley Power Hour.
Yeah, yeah. Even though
Yeah.
his shows are usually like 3 hours and contain 40 minutes of content.
Yeah. I like that. Let's do that.
Let's do that. Let's have a live reaction where we are just silent the entire
Yeah.
time.
I think I would like that. Just really like let it soak in.
Yeah, that sounds tremendous. Would you like to tell of the next story related to E3?
Yes. So, in something that maybe is surprising to some, but maybe not surprising to others, E3 or at E3, Microsoft and Bethesda will be in the same conference. They're like just going to be one big hefty chonkin conference.
Hefty Chonkin Conference.
So we'll see. I was not surprised at this news because I don't really feel like, but anytime Bethesda, because I remember they had their first conference a few years ago. Anytime they have their own conference, I just feel like it's like, you guys, are you sure you're going to fill all this time with stuff? Are you positive you have enough stuff to fill this whole time? And it's like, no. It's like, oh, we're going to show you Fallout 76. We're going to apologize for Fallout 76. And then we're going to show you Elder Scrolls Blades for like 10 minutes. There's
Don't
going to
forget
be
about those logo reveals, though.
Right. We're going to show you our logo reveal. Hey, you guys remember Doom? And then it's like, here's some DLC if you're interested in a game that you don't care about. And then the show's over. And it's like, that's Bethesda's shows. So we'll see this year what it's going to be like. I think it makes sense for them to be with Microsoft because I feel like Microsoft might not have as much this year and Bethesda might have a little bit more. I don't really know. Elder
I'm
Scrolls 6,
excited.
hello? Elder Scrolls 6, anybody gonna pick up the phone? I'm kind of waiting on that one that we saw in 2017 or whatever that was.
Like 2004, 2002,
19
1923.
Yeah, 1900 when, it was like pre-Titanic days.
Yeah, Titanic. The ultimate reference point for Elder Scrolls release dates.
I don't know. I heard 1900s and I thought of the Titanic.
I'm excited about this news, though, because I agree with you. Bethesda's had some very lackluster, to be generous, conferences over the past few years. So
Stinkers.
stinkers. They smelled. The smell the smell came off of the television.
Yeah.
But the idea that they take their best foot and put it forward in a Microsoft conference, we kind of talked about this last week. Like the best reveals at Bethesda conferences are great, but they're absolutely bogged down by like literal hours of nothing. And Microsoft shows are usually pretty packed and great, especially the past like 3 or 4 years. Um, so the idea of taking those best reveals and then just putting them into an already great show, it could be like they could really do something excellent as long as they're not like this is a joint conference and then it's an hour of Bethesda meandering around, not knowing how to move, and then Microsoft, that would be way too much.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Guess we'll see in a few weeks.
All right, so I think it's about time this week that we jump into what we've been playing. And I want to start with something I have not played. So, couple weeks ago, we had the release of Castlevania Season 4, which is a adaptation of the classic Konami franchise Castlevania. This is the fourth and final season. It started in 2017. Um, I've been watching it since it came out. It, in my opinion, is one of, if not the best, video game adaptation ever put to film, which competition's not exactly stiff, but we'll see if Mark Wahlberg's mustacheless face can knock that out. But
Mm, doubtful.
doubtful. But I really loved season 4. It brought a lot of very interesting storylines to a close. It was super satisfying. It left just enough unanswered to keep me wondering, but not like feel like they withheld stuff. Um, the series is going to continue in some fashion. There's a spin-off already confirmed, and after watching this, I cannot tell you what that spin-off will be about. There are so many things that could be, so many interesting characters that still exist. Or it could honestly be set in like the far future and just have Alucard, because he lives a really long time. So he's Mr. Vampire Man. But
Right.
the action was fantastic. Um, the thing about this season was that they spent four seasons building up all these characters that I've come to love, and watching some of them clash and watching their stories come to an end, it makes that remarkably choreographed and animated action extra satisfying because I care about both sides of the fight so much and I'm so invested on what happens. And there was not a moment that left me unsatisfied. So if you've not watched this series, or if you perhaps dropped out after the first a little bit lackluster season, I highly recommend getting back in now. Season 2 gets very good. Season 3 is one of the best seasons of TV, in my opinion. And then season 4 really brought the series to a satisfying close. So I watched that this week. I guess I played it in the sense that I clicked next episode every 20 or 30 minutes. What a video game.
What a game.
How about you,
Yeah,
Kelly? What have you been actually playing?
yes. So I have still been playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Didn't have a lot of time last week because things were a little bit crazy, but I hunkered down at the end of last week and this weekend, and I just played and played and played. I finished the first game. Crazy thing, didn't realize you could not do the DLC after. There's no like end game.
Oh, that's
The
strange.
last save point is right before the final boss battle. So not my favorite. Thought maybe that would change, and I did not realize that. So there's a DLC that I have not played. I did play it way back in the day when it came out. Well, not 2007, but played it back in like 2012. So, but and now I'm on to Mass Effect 2. I'm a good ways in, maybe like 20 hours, I want to say.
Okay.
I've played Mass Effect 2 so many times. It was the first Mass Effect game I played. It has a very special place in my heart. I love everything about that game, even the stuff that other people don't like. So it's been really nice to see it. I would say with the remaster, I haven't noticed anything super different. Obviously, the frame rate is a lot better and the textures look a lot better. But, it's the bones, much like Mass Effect 1, the bones of the game are still the same. Um, Combat's still fun, not as fun as like 3, and definitely not as fun as Andromeda, but um, it's still fun. More fun than the first game, which combat is still a little bit clunky, even with the remaster. Better, but there's only so much that you can do.
Would you say if somebody is brand new to the series and they're getting the Legendary Edition, um, that they should play one? Or because I know
Yeah,
that they have like a comic book choice
yeah,
selection opening. Is it
yeah.
better to do that or to just go through it and play one even with
You
the dated gameplay?
you should really play one. I think that it sets up it sets up the story in a way that you don't really get as much in Mass Effect 2, because the story in Mass Effect 2 is kind of a diversion from like the main antagonist is like the Reapers. And while they are the antagonist in 2, it is sort of a diversion from that story from the first.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I really think that it's important. Speaking as someone who skipped the first game the very first time that they played, I think it's really important to have that context from the first game. And there are
Yeah.
really, really nice story beats in the first game that I feel like just are such a pleasure to play through and enjoy, that I wouldn't advise anyone to skip it. Even if that comic is like, you know, you make all your choices through the comic, uh, I would still just play the first game because, even if it's dated, it's still fun to play. You actually meet the characters. There are characters that you're not going to feel attached to unless you meet them in the first game. One in particular that I'm thinking of, his name is Rex. And I
Yeah.
felt like I didn't really care about Rex that much when I very first played Mass Effect, because I was like, I started with 2 and I was like, who is this guy? Um, but when you play the first game, you learn more about him and why he is the way he is and why he's doing what he's doing. So it's just important for character context, for story context. And it provides stuff that I think the comic maybe glossed over a little bit too, in terms of lore.
Well, because I hear what you're saying, because in my opinion, and tell me if you agree or disagree, Mass Effect was heavily marketed on decision making and like how important your choices were. It was fine, and I enjoyed that part. But honestly, for me, my favorite parts of the franchise was just like spending time with those characters over the course of
Mm-hmm.
many games. And honestly, I cannot tell you most of the decisions I made, but I can recall my relationships that I had with those characters years on still.
Yes, and that's really a staple, I think, for any BioWare game, is the characters really are the saving grace. Not saying that the games need a saving grace. They're all very good games, I think. I know people have their qualms with the end of the third Mass Effect, and a lot of people didn't really like Inquisition that much, Dragon Age Inquisition that much, because it was very much MMO RPG-esque in its
Yeah.
open worldness. But the characters of those games are written in a way that is, especially in Mass Effect 3, because in the Dragon Age series, the other big BioWare property, you have different companions each game with a little bit of overlap between 2 and 3, um, and the expansion for 1 and 2. But with Mass Effect, you pretty much have the same characters following you throughout the entire series, including your main character, which is, I think, why people are very, very attached to Commander Shepard, is because you spend hundreds of hours with them.
Hmm.
But so it's a lot easier to become more engrossed in the characters and their storylines, and they, especially around the third game, I would say, maybe like the second game, because the second game is so character focused, because you're like, recruit loyalty mission, like it's really all about your crew.
Hmm.
But especially in the third game, they really do start to feel like real people. The way that they interact with each other, the way that they interact, sorry, my mic just, the way that they interact with each other, the way that they interact with you, the player, it's very much like, wow, you really come to care for these characters. And I'm with you on like the choices. I can make a different choice over a playthrough about what I'm going to do on Vermeer or whatever, but I can't make a different choice with, I'm never not recruiting these characters. They're always coming on my ship with me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, so I would highly recommend starting with the first game and not skipping it, especially with the Legendary Edition. I mean, the textures are better. The the frame rate is better. It's like it's nice to look at. They did a
Yeah.
really good job remastering it in terms of appearance and aesthetic. So, you know, in my opinion, you really have no reason to skip the first one. The gameplay is not that bad.
Yeah. And I mean, you could probably just turn down the difficulty and blaze through that game pretty quickly anyway and just
Abs-
enjoy the story.
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The difficulty in the Legendary Edition, I feel, has also been lowered. Like on normal, it feels like playing on easy.
Mm.
And that seems to be sort of a consensus online, is particularly in the first game, things feel a lot easier than they used
So it's not just because you're an absolute expert pro gamer.
to. No, I am not. I have really bad aim, and Mass Effect is a third person shooter, so make
Well,
of that what you will.
I'm very excited to hear your continuing thoughts, because I mean, as far as like gameplay and story goes, I'm sure that you have very few new thoughts. So it's very exciting to hear about specifically your thoughts on like the updates, because you've seen the original games so many times that you can probably see those updates more than anybody.
Yeah. And it's funny, I actually played through Mass Effect last year during quarantine. I don't know if I said this, but I literally bought like all the DLCs on my Xbox 360, and I played through the whole series, and then they were like, surprise, we're remastering the whole trilogy with all the DLC, and I was like, wow, okay, cool. I just spent like more than $60 on all 3 games in the DLC, but it's cool. Like, it's fine. I'm not
Well,
mad.
you were probably like, darn, I have to play it again.
Oh no, I'm gonna make all the same choices that I usually do and romance the same character. Oh no. Yeah, that was me.
uh, so talking about something I actually did play this week, I went ahead and stayed up a little later than I should have last night to complete Resident Evil Village on PS5 for this episode. I have quite a few thoughts. So first of all, Kelly, you have not played it, but you have seen the whole thing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I will avoid any specific spoilers. If you're sensitive to like gameplay mechanic discussion or like general discussions of what happens, um, then maybe I'll see you next week, and you can tune out now. But I will not discuss any directions that the plot goes specifically, just my general thoughts. So um, I loved the game. I think it was a little flawed in areas I was not quite expecting. Um, the opening hours were really special in my opinion, because you start in a large castle. You have to go around different hallways, different rooms to get keys or different objects that you use to solve puzzles and enter new spaces. And I love that Resident Evil style. Um, it reminded me of like the Resident Evil 2 police station, which is like one of my favorite video game locations ever,
Hmm.
and it just felt nice to be unraveling this location. But that essentially is only the first few hours, depending how you play. If you know what you're doing, you could probably get through it very quickly. And if you don't, and you're exploring for all the little things, it will probably take you closer to like 5 hours. But uh, it was my favorite part of the game, and I have to say I was a tiny bit disappointed after that. It was still intriguing, and I liked what was happening, but it was a lot more action heavy and a lot more linear. And it felt less like I was unraveling a space and more like I was walking down a winding hallway.
Hmm.
Um, and I did not mind going down that hallway because visually that game is stunning, especially on PlayStation 5. 4K, 60 FPS, and ray tracing. Technically, the ray tracing mode is supposed to be 45 frames per second, but they optimized it very well, so it was 60 for the majority of the game, and I only saw a couple hiccups. Um, the just everything visually is very nice. The characters look remarkable, um, and I enjoyed playing it. The gun combat is kind of janky on purpose. You don't have a ton of control over your aim, and it's not super accurate, and it's hard to shoot quickly. But that's so that the monsters coming at you feel way more threatening. Um,
Hmm.
by the end of the game, I kind of learned all of the animations, because a lot of the monsters have similar animations to each other, where they kind of like wobble to the left, and then they look at you for just a second, and then they wobble to the right. So it's really hard to like get headshots off, which is the best way to take them out. Um, but they loop those animations. So once you learn it and generally where your reticle should be, it becomes a lot easier to start cleaning up, taking out enemies really quickly, which was a huge change because the beginning of the game I was running from everybody. And my early impressions when I was talking to you, Kelly, I said how early in the game the enemies felt scary because they were coming at me in large numbers, and I felt like I couldn't even stop to look at them because I couldn't handle it and I had to run.
Hmm.
uh, by the end of the game, basically no matter the size of the crowd, I just took one step back and I felt confident in my ability to take it out. It was still fun for sure because it's a satisfying system they designed, but um, it was definitely an action game by the end. It was like not a horror game, but an action game in a horror setting. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yes.
Um, and there was one segment, which I assume is what you were referencing last time we talked about it, that was very different from the rest of the game and
Yes.
and much more horror centric.
Yes. Did
Um,
you enjoy that segment?
I did. I wasn't very scared because I knew the mechanics so well by that point that I did not feel threatened by the threat. That I will not I won't describe the threat because it is very shocking, and I think if you're gonna play the game, you will be shocked, even if you're not scared. It is shocking, but yeah, I was able to flee pretty easily, and like I knew the layout of the space I was in already, so I wasn't like scared, that I wasn't gonna be able to get away. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was very Silent Hill esque, very
Mm-hmm.
clearly wore their inspiration on their sleeve with that, which is not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a short segment in the middle of the game, so it was not like the game took a turn halfway through. It was just like a little hour detour, which I loved. I think that more games should do detours, try new things for a small segment of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just listed a lot of negatives, but I want to make it clear I did love this game. The story was intriguing, the characters were fantastic, they were very ridiculous and over the top in the best way, and I had fun start to finish, and I was satisfied by the end of the story. Um, it's just definitely, um, I think, especially with how high I hold the Resident Evil series, in regard. That was not a very good sentence, but I'm just saying I hold that series very highly in my head, so I'm a little more critical, but I still acknowledge that I loved it very much, and I'm excited by the prospect that Resident Evil is kind of splitting now, because this feels like Resident Evil 7 2 more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they just 2 years ago made Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I think it would be very smart and cool to have like two distinct series running alongside each other. Because Resident Evil 2 Remake is my favorite game in the series, and it was designed so well. And I'm not going to go too deep into it because it's a 2019 game and I should review the 2021 game, but I love the idea that that kind of series exists, and also we're able to have a game like Resident Evil Village at the same time. And I hope that they continue to expand both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on one hand, you have sort of the standard like third person like tank controls of like Resident Evil 2 and 3, and maybe 4. You know, here's hoping for a 4 remake, and then
Hopefully, yes, I agree.
yes, and then you kind of have the first person like Ethan Winters story of 7 and 8.
Hmm.
So I agree. I think it's kind of nice to have those two sort of branches going at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't care much for the Winter Saga in a lot of senses because the whole point is that it's like kind of
Silly.
silly and like kind of characterless on purpose, so like you can kind of impose yourself in the story. Um, but I think if they continue this Winter Saga, if you will, into Resident Evil not 9 or whatever they end up calling it, because just
Hmm.
to be clear, even though there is a VIII in the title of this game, Capcom insists and will get angry if you call it Resident Evil 8. So
Right.
maybe they have an actual Resident Evil 8 in the works, and this was like a misleading thing on purpose, which would be
That'd be wild.
it would be interesting, yeah. But I was very happy with this. I look forward to what's next. I'm glad that I played it. Took me about 8 hours to finish. Um, wasn't a particularly difficult game. There were a couple puzzles that had me stumped and a couple fights that took a little longer than they probably should have. But like, if you're looking for a challenge, this might not be the place unless you want to play it on the unlockable very hard mode, then it might actually become something very challenging. But realistically, I think most people coming to this game are looking for more environmental storytelling and interesting monsters and such. So I don't think that's
Hmm.
too big a concern.
I would agree.
So Kelly, I think this was a very great premiere episode.
Yes.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are that I'm very excited for E3 and that I can't wait to discuss it with you when the time comes in like 3 weeks.
Yes, I think realistically, the 3 episodes or 2 or 3, whatever math is, that are leading up to E3 will almost definitely end with 10, 15 minutes of E3 discussion. And I think,
Hmm.
tell me your thoughts on this, Kelly. Week before E3, we go through the news, we go through what we've been talking, what we've been playing, maybe a little quickly, and then second half of the podcast, E3 speculation.
Ooh, okay. Okay. I see your vision, and I am down.
I'm excited for this. This was a great episode. I had a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone who's listening. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. We're going to keep at it. We are on Spotify now. This might honestly be on Google and Apple by the time you're listening, but if not, it will be soon. We'll be on all your platforms, on your phone, on your computer, probably on your TV. You probably
Whoa.
have Spotify on there, right?
True.
We're everywhere. You can't escape us.
Sorry about it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Kelly, for such an awesome episode. This was great.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting.
See y'all next week.
See you next week.